Hello, I'm OmnusI, your game master this evening here in my lair. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am Rob, here in the lair of OmnusI, giving you my State of the Dungeon address for June 29th, 2017. The game, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The characters are moving beyond the adventure Dark Days in Stoneholm. They have now completed it and are progressing along the storyline contained within the adventure Princes of the Apocalypse, which I have heavily modified, but roughly the storyline they're going through. They have fresh leads now to take them, now that they're 3rd level, out of the dwarven city of Stoneholm into the valley in which the events of the adventure will take place. Once again, the party makeup is Otto the Bard, Terran the Fighter, Glim the Dwarven Cleric, Gath the Sorcerer, Oric the Rogue, and the GM NPC is Glug the Barbarian, sometimes Sorcerer. And as we began the episode, the characters tied up the last things that they wanted to do in Stoneholm. It was their chance to buy dwarven grade goods and enjoy the goodwill that their work had done for them. They had already finished most everything that they had planned. They have their weapons blessed and everything, and they've walked around. They have some neat, nifty abilities. But they are preparing to set out. And once the whole group was together and everything was assured that they were done, they headed out the door of the fortress. In kind of a recall to an earlier session, where one of their first combat encounters as a group was fighting a lunatic directly outside of the doors of the keep. This time they ran into an emissary from Verbabonk who was riding a griffin, a very haughty emissary, and he sassed them plenty. It was kind of a social test to see if the group could contain their tempers, or if they could get themselves in trouble. And the group kind of reminded Glug that he was outside of the city now and would not be able to be tried by the dwarves if he assaulted the emissary. Glug didn't have a lot of resistance to his impulses of punching his teeth down his throat, so he swung, rolled a natural 20, knocked him right off of his griffin and down. The griffin didn't care for that much, but then Glug also rolled a high intimidation roll on the griffin, and the griffin decided it just wanted to be over by its master. So since he knocked him into the city, the group left the city with no further... They kept teasing Glug because he couldn't control himself and punched him, but they're happy they have the half-orc to do it. So they set off. Now there is a small little village outside of the city, which basically liaisons the kind of merchants and craftsmen who don't want to live underground, but still want to supply the town. They walked through that without much difficulty. Nothing really tempted them. They passed directly through. And when given their choice of paths that they could take out of the town, they either could take the north trade road, which would go along one side of the valley. It would eventually lead them up to the city of city is an exaggeration, the township of Hamlet, which is adapted in the adventure because it's adaptable for a variety of worlds. So instead of Red Larch from the book, it's Hamlet. They also could take another road that would lead them towards Greenfield, which is a halfling monastery plantation farm, where the blessings of the goddess Yondala are upon the halflings who work very hard there, and anybody can come and be fed as long as they're willing to put in their sweat and toil to help out. But they were thinking about going there as the number one thing that was the impetus for them to leave. Well, they were told that there was a delegation of dwarves who had vanished, which was the impetus that sent the first group into the valley. They were hired to go and find the fate of this dwarven caravan, especially the VIP, a young prince who had been with them, and the relic axe that he carried. The first group didn't find him, so they have higher hopes. However, they also found out that even Stoneholm was going to feel the pinch because the entire valley was being wrecked by horrible magic that was throwing the order of natural balances out of whack. The spring was extremely hot. It was 90 in the high 90s when for this time of the year it would have been in the 50s to 60s. So they were running into dangers of not being able to travel in their armor because they were going to get exhausted. It just generally was unpleasant. The air was humid, but the ground was dry and barren. In general, it's messed up. It needs some heroes to fix it. So they at first were going to go off to Greenfields. The other option that they had was to go around the southern end of the valley and then up the far sides, which would have taken them to other towns that they had already been to, like Belliard, and to some of the outskirting plantations and ranches. So they decided they were going to go to Greenfields and try to find out what was their secret. If they were affected by the evil magic, what could be done to prevent it. So I rolled a random encounter, and as they were traveling along, sweating and sweltering, they saw a grove of apparently untouched trees that were still green and leafy, as if they weren't suffering any of the effects. And their first instinct was, well, there's a pool there feeding this. So they went to investigate, and they went into the grove of trees, and they found at the center was this pool. And the pool was being fed by a statue of a lion that about 6.5 feet long. Water was issuing out of its mouth into the pool. The pool itself seemed devoid of life, but the greenery around was lush and full. There were no fish or anything, but everything seemed very healthy, and the entire place seemed really, really nice. So, of course, they were on their guard, as you would be in a world of magic and legends and myths that you could come face to face with at any time. So several of them went up to check the water to fill up water skins. The cleric walked around to check out the lion. The fighter type stayed back to watch everybody. So the sorcerer went up to fill his water skin. He was dragged under the water. He was compelled to drink. He put his face down and couldn't get out of the water. So he was flailing about and trying to get out. The cleric walked around and he ran into the nymph of the grove. And she asked him what he was doing there, and he was very courteous, which is kind of contradictory to how he usually plays, as kind of a jerk. But he was all like, "No, this is wonderful. We appreciate that it's cool in here, and your trees are beautiful, and we just appreciate getting out of the heat, and thank you for this." And she was kind of taken aback by that. So she eased the magic off that was going to draw the sorcerer down into her home under the waters. And so she came back with Glim, and she talked to them. She told them that there was evil magic all around. She couldn't pin it down because she's a simple very, very, very instinctive level druidish. She's not trained. But because she's a creature of the Feywild, she has a connection, an otherworldly connection to the land through her link to the Feywild. And the pool is sort of a portal to the Feywild, too. I do like having a mirror realm of pure nature and chaos. It's very similar to, I find, similar to the Umbra in White Wolf's World of Darkness, where there's a spirit world directly overlaying the other world that kind of touches on it in places. Well, in this case, the Feywild serves much of the same purpose and is an inexhaustible source that you can continually bring fey creatures and justify having some of the stranger creatures in D&D without having to just say it's crazy wizards doing it. Owlbears? Well, maybe owlbears were created because of some deranged wizard, but they also could have been something dreamed up in the Feywild and then spat out into the material world. Speaking about owlbears, no, we'll leave that for now. So anyhow, they charmed the nymph. Well, she charmed a few people, but she let her charms go. She wasn't able to ensnare any of the ones she was really interested in. Glug, of course, was enthusiastic in his appreciation for her, but yeah, he scares her a little bit, especially with that big axe. So she was polite, and she gave them some food, and they basically said, well, we want to deal with this. This is a problem we want to try to fix. And she says, well, probably the best way to check is if you go into the Feywild, I can help you to get there, and you'll be able to see the evil magic because it's mirrored into the world itself. In the near Feywild, the evil magic is like an orange, vile fog, and it'll get stronger the closer you get to the evil. And they're like, okay, but how do we get out of the Feywild afterwards? Like, we can get there, assuming we can get there, because the Feywild's probably pretty nasty in some places, but how do we get out of the Feywild to the real world? She's like, well, use a portal, like this one. Oh, you won't have one where you go. So that got rid of the Feywild jaunt. But what she did offer to do was to try to reach out into the land and commune with them and the spirits of the land and give them some information. So she did that. They had a little bit of time. And she came back and she said, well, there's 4 separate places that are causing this evil magic. And every single one of them is centered around the hills that make up the center of the valley. Around the outskirts are where civilization is. The river cuts right through. And in the middle, there are all this badlands of hills and plateaus and stuff that's not civilized. It's in there that the problem is. One of them is on the banks of the river. I can feel it. You know, it's evil flowing through the river. The other ones are touching upon it in various ways, but all of them are bad. So the group remembers that their characters died in the river dungeon, and so half of them are like, yeah, let's go, and the rest of the group are like, we were 5th level when we died, now we're only 3rd level, I'm not sure we want to go back there. Who says you don't learn things as you go, huh? So the group instead decides, okay, well, who can we talk to learn more about this? And she gives them a lead because she's tied to the people who follow the old ways. In Greyhawk, they in the various adventures that Wizards of the Coast have been putting out, they put out 5 different factions to both add a little bit of drama. If your party is made up of people from different factions, you can get more information or more resources, but many of them are conflicting with each other. In this case, she's just a simple nymph. She knows that people who revere the old ways are often friendly to her type, so she gave them a contact in Hamlet, and interestingly enough, in the list of NPCs that I've converted, this was in the first group that before this last group of PCs was here. His name was also Geth, just as the sorcerer is. He is Geth of the Gnarly Forest, who is a druid who is currently shape-changed and hanging around in Hamlet. So the group have a name, and they know they want to go to Hamlet to learn as much as they can. So they start traveling along, and they decide that they're going to take a secret path that will take them through to the trade route that will lead them back up to Hamlet. So they start traveling. They are refreshed after their stay with the nymph. So even though it's getting nightfall, they figure we can leg it. We're not tired yet. The nymph did warn them that there was an evil house that had been built up alongside of the path they were taking, and that it was ruled by evil and they shouldn't go there. She just said they shouldn't go. It's against their interest to go there, which immediately made them want to go in there. So when they get to this point, they're like, they left it up to a coin flip, but they didn't go in, interestingly enough. They did camp, and they did end up meeting an owl bear. Actually, I believe that happened before the nymph. But anyhow, they had a fight with an owl bear. The owl bear came in, roar, rock Terran. The group wasted it in one round. And it was a powerful owl bear, too, with almost the maximum amount of hit points that owl bear had. So they're able to do about 80 points of damage if all of their mojo hits in a single round. It's important to know what your group is capable of doing. Now, the dice can turn sour. There's rounds where they're completely ineffectual. I've had combat rounds where they did almost no damage in a round. But when their Alpha Strike hits and they lay out, they can lay down some lumber. And that poor owlbear never stood a chance. They didn't even make owlbear jerky out of it. So then the nymph encounter happened. Then they had their trek. And they're traveling along in the dark. And this is towards the end of the night, the end of the session. Otto's player had to leave to go to work. So the group was going along, and another planned encounter came up. I had a combat encounter for them. Kind of a nasty one. They were surrounded by 5 ankegs that were buried in the ground, waiting for somebody to come along, trip the trap. They would come up and feast. Ankegs are nasty creatures. They're challenge rating 2, but they are combat beasts because they do high amounts of damage, have a decent armor class. Probably the biggest thing, though, is that all of their bites that they do add acid damage, and they can spray acid. So they can hit from range, they can do devastating damage in close range, and 5 of them, well, that was a blob of some hit points for them to chop through. The group was basically held to advantage that they were just beasts, and they didn't know to team up to take down opponents faster. So everybody got one except the sorcerer was lucky enough to be in the center of the group, and they didn't go after him until he started really ticking them off. So the group fights back. The Ankegs attack and score a couple hits and show that they are a fierce threat. However, Terran is himself a fierce threat with his polearm mastery and the fact that he's rolled damn near maximum hit points. At 3rd level, he has 40 hit points. High constitution, rolling nearly max. He is a force to be reckoned with. So he feels very confident about taking on single foes, and after he puts paid to a single foe, then he immediately goes off to help whoever needs it. This is very much the case here. He took down his fairly quickly and actually frightened it using his intimidating attack with his Battlemaster specialization, using a superiority dice and forcing one to be frightened. So it would have had disadvantage if he moved up to attack. Well, that one peeled away and started using its acid spit. The other ones attacked. The group didn't move very much. They stayed in a line, so after Glug attacked the one in the front and hurt it, it acid sprayed down and hit the whole party. That's unfortunate because, well, the people who couldn't afford to take a lot of damage took some damage. And then the next attack dropped Otto. And with a single bite, Geth went down. He had managed to launch a magic missile, and he was actually starting to use some more potent spells in his combat repertoire, rather than just relying on his Rays of Frost and Chill Touch. He launched a magic missile and then got dropped with a single vicious bite. After dodging the bolt of acid, he still doesn't have many hit points, the curse of most primary spellcasters. And then finally, Glug barely got hit. As a matter of fact, the Ankegs that attacked him missed every time. He frenzied. He didn't do anything the first round so that he could get 2 attacks per round because he'd take the path of the Berserker for his leveling up, and he was able to do 2 damage and a great deal of damage, but he remained unhit except by that first bolt of acid that got spit. Terran got mauled pretty badly. Glim got chipped away at pretty badly, to the point where he ended up dropping from the damage. He took some vicious bites because he was a potent combatant, and they locked their jaws on him, and yeah, he went down. Auric took a few shots, but he was smart enough to move out of the way, and then he and Terran, well, they're getting along thick as thieves. Terran is using his distracting blow to grant advantage to Ornn, and all he needs is advantage, and that sneak attack damage, the sweet sneak attack damage is just flowing like, well, let's just say most enemies are going to have a hard time when those two get to fight together. I believe that is going to be something that we will be seeing again and again and again. Together they chop through a couple of the vicious ankegs, and only one of them managed to get away. The one that was spitting acid, the one that had been frightened, moved out of the combat range so that its fright of Terran was not going to continue to bother it because it was going to launch acid. And then by the time it was going to have to try to, even though it was frightened, move up, the rest of its clutch mates were all dead. So the party mopped up even though the players took a significant amount of damage. So the Glug gave a healing potion to Otto to bring him around, because Otto was in rough shape. I had failed 2 death saves for Otto, and I would have felt really, really bad if I had to tell the player of Otto that yet another one of his characters had died. Especially, I was mortified making the death saves, because I've been rolling a lot of 1s for Glug. My dice don't like player characters anymore. So I was afraid his character was going to die in my hands, and there wouldn't have been anything I could have done. So Glug actually made a medicine roll to see what shape he was in. But I looked at the character sheet, and Glug doesn't have a healing kit. So he couldn't try to patch him up. So he used his 1 healing potion that he had and jammed it in his mouth and got him around. And Otto has a healing spell, so he healed Glim up so that he could wake up. And then he threw down a major healing spell that helped out Geth. So the party got up again. Battered, bruised, yes, but still alive. And this was towards the tail end of the night, too. So the group moved forward along after resting and ended up finding the trade road again. And as they got there, they saw that a group of guards from the area were riding along the trail in the direction they were going. They hailed the guards. And so the guards were kind of beat up. They were exploring they were on an outrider mission to go and check on one of the towns that was at the far end of the trail before you would get to Stoneholm. And as they were going down, they were attacked by a group of bandits. This is another major encounter that I had designed. The bandits had outnumbered them badly, and they had a manticore in a cage that the floor, ceiling, and sides were occluded except for one, and they basically would poke it and have it shoot its spines out like artillery. And they had it camouflaged so that they came upon it, and all of a sudden they were getting peppered with spikes from this manticore. I thought it was kind of a clever idea. They also had some archers. I mean, these guys are ready. And if worse comes to worse, they can release the manticore to cause havoc as the rest of them try to escape. So the guards did sustain some injuries from that ambush before they had to run away. And now as they were moving up, they were preparing to try to either avoid the bandits or try to take out their sentries, doing their jobs, but they were undermanned. Well, this is one of the times when Glim got to shine. He went, bam, 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 you're all healed now. I think he threw away all of his healing spells, but the captain, or the sergeant who was with him, was so impressed he gave him his badge and said, "I deputize you. You are now a guard of Hamlet. Welcome to the crew. Do you want to travel with us? We can go and we can take those bandits out." And the group is like, geez, we almost. I'm sure they were thinking to themselves, well, we almost died against these oversized ants. Having a bunch of guards around would help. It's 5 guards who are well armed with chainmail and such. They're on horses, and their sergeant looks like he's kind of tough. So they're going to travel with these guards, and there was some good role playing. Glim got an inspiration point for that, which is good. Honestly, in many cases, I've seen some pretty darn good role playing. I think Taryn already has an inspiration point, but he is almost all the way up to another full inspiration point. Geth is almost up to a full inspiration point. Auric is almost up to a full inspiration point. The only one who's not, I believe, is Otto. Otto can stand to do a few things in character to get that sweet, sweet inspiration going. But, again, it's open. As a low-level character, you are all about making your character and living as that character as your expression. It's usually not going to be by overwhelming with combat. And as a lore college bard, probably doubly so. And that is where we ended that session. The party is expanded with help from these guards. They're going to travel together. They know there's a big fight coming up. They're ready for it. Beyond that, Hamlet and getting back on path for the rest of the adventure. So things are looking up for the group. I really should try to convince them to get a party name together. That always adds to a group. But that is how we're doing it here in the lair of OmnusI as my state of the dungeon. I hope you've enjoyed this installation. Keep checking in. We'll have more 2 weeks from now. We'll continue and to pick up the tale. Next week, Werewolves of the Caribbean. Finally back in the Caribbean. So we will see you then. Thank you, and safe adventures.